Greetings, friends. A few months ago I saw this video on YouTube. The title was Post-World War II Anti-Fascist Educational Film by the title of Don't Be a Sucker from 1947. This is indeed a propaganda film from America not long after the Second World War. So I thought it was outrageous when I watched it. It's only about 17 minutes and I was meaning to do a commentary on it, but I put it off for a while, so I haven't made any notes. I haven't got this into my mind recently, so I'm just gonna take it from here.
Henry here got on the train with $200. He couldn't see any harm in a friendly game of cards. What if the other men were strangers? And take Joe Collins. He's got a nice wife at home. But he met this girl at the bar, and she looked after the first couple of drinks. There's a good old-fashioned word for people like us. We call them suckers. And there are other people. People who stay up nights figuring out how to take away what they've got.
This otherwise irrelevant segment is playing up what it's useful to show what is a sucker. So, because you don't want to be a sucker. Don't be a sucker. It's the same kind of attitude the propaganda might use today. See, they, don't get pulled in. Fundamentally, it's irrational. Don't get caught up in something which is irrational. And I would not I don't take the side of, that politically incorrect term, but the left, they demonize that movement of the mid-century movement in Germany and Italy as their ultimate expression of evil. That's their baseline from how to measure what anything is good or bad. So they characterized it as irrational, and only by intellectual laziness and pride and self-interest do you get caught up in these ideologies.
There are all kinds of games. Mike here, for instance. He's got everything. He's young, he's healthy, got a job. And he's got plenty of food. Big factories to make things a man can use. Big cities to do the business of a big company. And people. Lots of people. Enough to work the farm and build the factories, dig the mines.
The film cut out a little bit. I'm not sure why, but they were saying he's got America. This man, he's got it all because he's got America. America has all the industry, the farms, the mines, the transportation, linking it together. They show him on the train. They show the prairies.
Run the business. All kinds of people. People from different countries with different religions, different colored skins. Free people.
This is what it's really about. This is where they slipped it in. This is what it's really about. What their conception of America is. It's a revolutionary conception.
They can live together and work together and build America together because they're free.
What are you building? You're building America. But what are you building? The land of the free. We are free, but what are you building?
Free to vote.
Oh, okay. Democracy.
To say what they pleased.
Free speech. Woohoo. Welcome to the internet.
Go to their own churches.
Go to their own churches. That's nice. And you all worship different gods. And that's just fine, because it's liberalism.
To pick their own jobs.
I mean, I don't know, you could like line up many freedoms side by side. Like freedoms to do this, freedoms to do that. It's like, I don't know, it's ambiguous. Some freedoms are good, others are not good. I mean, it's totally the wrong lens to apply to what is good in the human condition, what is worth striving towards. Not in terms of freedoms. That's just really a handicap.
Yeah, Mike's got something, all right.
He's got something, all right. He's smiling. He's got a twinkle in his eye, and his teeth are shining. He's looking forward to the future, because America is the land of the future, at least at this time.
He's got America.
They're constructing what they want you to believe America is in this post-World War II time period.
But there are guys who stay up nights figuring out how to take that away from him.
I happen to know the facts. Now, friends, I'm just an average American. But I'm an American. And some of the things I see in this country of ours make my blood boil. I see people with foreign money. I see Negroes holding jobs that belong to me and you. Now I ask you, if we allow this thing to go on, what's going to become of us real Americans?
I've heard this kind of talk before, but I never expected to hear it in America.
This fellow seems to know what he's talking about.
You couldn't do that these days, because the comment was kind of genuine. It was good acting. Like people are too dumb these days. You couldn't let him say that. You can't be subtle. You can't allow the other side to even express these things, even if, of course, as this goes on, the old stock American is going to be enlightened by the European intellectual, whom I don't like. I don't like the European intellectual guy at all from the get-go. Just don't like him.
What are we real Americans going to do about it? You'll find it right here in this little pamphlet. The truth about Negroes and foreigners. The truth about the Catholic Church.
Let's put aside the questions of these Catholic Church or whatever and different races. What the propagandists are doing here is they're putting forth this model of how the terrible fascist movement divided society into segments and championed one segment above the others. Are there different groups within societies? Yes, there are different groups. So they're showing you some truth there. There are different cultural groups within the country. So fundamentally, this is the conflict from the beginning. They're actually confronting it, which I'll give even propagandists credit for, because even the propaganda back then, I wouldn't say this is smart for intelligent people, but it's not for stupid people either. So even the propaganda back then had to be maybe a different quality than today. It's just different. But they actually are confronting the main question there, because that's the whole point. Are you a people or are you not? Are you peoples? Are you intermingled peoples or not? And who gets to say what America is when all you said is you can champion freedom, different freedoms? What about the freedom to wipe out one group and replace it with another? At least metaphorically, with their culture, let's say.
Do you believe in that kind of talk?
All makes pretty good sense to me. And I tell you, friends, we'll never be able to call this country our own until it's a country without. Without what? Yeah, without what? Without Negroes. Without alien foreigners. Without Catholics. without Freemasons. You know these Masons. What's wrong with the Masons? I'm a Mason.
Yeah, it's interesting that they could talk about the Masons, and yeah, that's interesting that they brought that up. I don't think they wouldn't mention something like that today. Maybe the Masons aren't as relevant as they once were, but there's also just more because of the pop culture knowledge about Masons. Oh, Freemasons, and they wouldn't. Well, maybe they are that stupid to mention that, but I feel like that's kind of a dumb thing to mention. As if like we're trying to be sympathetic with the Freemason here. We're trying to be sympathetic with him. But genuinely, a lot of people didn't know, and they get caught up in Freemasonry, and they didn't know what it really was. So it is a thing that much of the middle class historically, the men were Freemasons. Many of them were. But that's an anti-Christian practice or philosophy, whatever you want to call it. So we see that if you divide society, then sooner or later your group is going to have the bullseye on it. But isn't there always an antagonism towards your group? And what did you really think, that you were going to exist peacefully forever in this liberal balance of different groups in a multicultural world with different religions and different philosophies in the same borders and the same economies? Do you think it would continue peacefully in harmony? The idea that, oh, well, now it's my group. Well, they're going to come for you sooner or later if you never stand up for what you believe to be worth dying for what you believe to be true, for what you to believe to be uncompromising principles. They're going to come for you sooner or later. But I'm not a fan of, fascism. I can say that word, right? Is that word? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not a fan of that. Like, that stuff is not Christian, neither is communism, and I still don't see how they're all that different. I've seen so many people try to explain the difference to me between fascism and communism, and it just seems like they're just differences on a spectrum. Like, they're both very totalitarian, and I don't even understand how you can say the Nazis were nationalistic and the Bolsheviks or the communists weren't nationalistic. Of course they had to participate in a sense of nationalism, and the state was supreme in both systems. So to me it's just kind of minutia. Does corporations work with the government? That's technically fascism. I mean, that would be happening all around, and would be happening in capitalist countries too, corporations working with the government. Isn't that true that the West became fascist more like in the German sense? Like corporations just working with the government. Corporations maybe ruling the government in a sense. Same kind of totalitarian system.
Hey, that fellow's talking about me.
And that makes a difference, doesn't it?
White male needs to be educated. This is a theme in cinema, at least in propaganda cinema, going back to the mid-century, going back almost more than 70 years now.
These are your enemies. These are the people who are trying to take over our country. Now you know them. You know what they stand for. And it's up to you and me to fight them. Fight them and destroy them before they destroy us. Thank you.
That's very menacing, and I mean, obviously that's a caricature. It's a little unreasonable, but I'm not picking much of an issue with the caricature there. It was useful, and it did bring up some points, but he's not someone obviously you're supposed to sympathize with because of the way he's angry, he's rabid, he's simple-minded, and he has an obsession, a tunnel vision obsession. He's willing to use violence. But then the fact is that his principle that they couldn't avoid was that it was getting at what is the nation? Who are you? What is your identity? Are other groups cooperating here? Are other groups taking advantage of other groups? what should you do for your own group? Now, are his prescriptions wise? Maybe not. But you see, so that's how they had to confront that, but then paint him as a fool and a dangerous fool.
Before he said Masons, you were ready to agree with him.
Well, yes, but he was talking about... What about those other people?
But in this country,
Those
we have
other
no
people.
other people. We are American people, boss.
Oh, wow. The European intellectual is going to get to tell the native-born American about what it means to be an American. Sit down and listen.
What about you? You aren't American, are you?
I was born in Hungary, but now I am an American citizen. And I have seen what this kind of talk can do. I saw it in Berlin.
What were you doing there?
I was a professor at the university.
He's a professor at the university in Berlin. These are red flags. These are not condemning him, but probably not going to be Christian, probably going to be modernist, probably going to be nihilistic, especially of this mid-20th century time period. Deconstructionist, opposed to the old world, deconstructing traditions. What is academia good for in the 20th century? Good for some things, very bad for much else. Overall participating in the dismantling of our culture. So why would you want to listen to this guy?
I heard the same words we have heard today. But I was a fool then. I thought Nazis were crazy people, stupid fanatics. But unfortunately it was not so. You see, they knew that they were not strong enough to conquer a unified country. So they split Germany into small groups. They used prejudice as a practical weapon to cripple the nation. Of course, that was not easy to do. They had to work hard to do it. You see...
Yeah, prejudice, whatever, I mean, that's dumb. Let's not get into that discussion. But the nation, like, what is the nation? It's just taking it for granted.
We human beings are not born with prejudices. Always they are made for us. Made by someone who wants something. Remember that when you hear this kind of talk.
All prejudices are made for you by someone who wants something from you or wants you to do a certain thing. Yeah, maybe that could be true. I mean, I have a prejudice towards bees or wasps. I might try to save the bee if it came inside my house, but if I saw a wasp, I would eliminate it. I have a prejudice towards them. Like, this guy's a retard. Academics are, for the large part, retards. And they've been like this for a long time. And even bigger retards could be in academia back then, because there wouldn't be that much film. They didn't have YouTube lectures, and so they could exist in their little world, and then they could make little productions like this once or twice in their lifetime, and they think they're so smart.
Somebody's going to get something out of it, and it isn't going to be you.
That's an aspect of what happens with prejudice, but prejudice is just like a whole inescapable dimension of the human condition. It's like you're talking about like sleeping, cognition, war, love, and also prejudice. It's like, it's kind of there. So, you know, to say now like, oh, our problem is prejudice. No, it's just, that's the same old revolutionary spirit. And it's not even bad in itself. It has good and bad contained within prejudice.
This is not classroom theory. I saw it happen. I saw it first in Berlin in 1932. 5 young men that I knew were standing in the crowd listening to the Nazi speaker. Eric was a Catholic. Anton, a student of mine, was a Jew. Heinrich owned a small hardware store. Karl was a farmer. And Hans was an unemployed metal worker.
To all you Aryan Germans, I say it is time you inherited the nation which rightfully belongs to you. To you alone belongs the glorious destiny of the greater Germany. The Nazi Party will provide land for the farmer, work for the worker, and profits for the small businessman. Who is getting these things now? The Jew. The Jew who has stolen our nation and our birthright. Who makes all the money and takes all our jobs? The Jew! He must be shunned. He must be ostracized. He must be eliminated. And the Catholics. We don't want our great nation run by a foreign church. We Germans will know what to do with these people when the time comes. They and their faith must be destroyed. Then there are the Freemasons. In Germany, we have no place for secret societies. There will be only one society, and that is the Nazi Party. There will be no secrecy about that in the new Greater Germany.
Without arguing for this ideology, I don't think this is really quite how it happened in Italy and in Germany. And it was a different story in both cases, but I don't think it was quite that simplistic. People aren't going to just get up and start listening to you if you can't speak to them on some other deeper level that gets in touch with what they think is their culture, or just someone they think they can relate to, someone who speaks words that they agree with. In the context of what happened in Germany during and after the First World War, in the context of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and the repercussions, it looked like they could have fallen easily into a communist party in Germany before the Nazis came to power. It could have gone either way, so there was all that context. I don't think it was just sane people and then suddenly someone just starts preaching or haranguing them in the streets and just being like, I'm like, this group, this group, this group, this group, good, 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 bad, 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 unify. That's probably just largely false. Undoubtedly, these movements did demonize certain groups, but look how modern liberals are doing the same thing.
One by one, he attacked each minority and he split them off one from the other. These men were all fellow Germans when they came here today. Now they were split into rival groups, suspicious of each other, hating each other. They were being swindled, all of them. But the man who was really being fooled was Hans. He was pure German, according to Nazi standards. To him they promised everything, and he fell for it. That's how Hans became a Superman. They gave him a uniform and they pumped up his ego. He wasn't just a little fellow out of work anymore. He was a member of the master race. Hans and thousands of others like him, all playing a sucker's game. They gambled with other people's liberty, and of course they lost their own. A nation of suckers. Hitler needed these people. There was lots of work to be done. There were trade unions to be smashed, because unions were organized and might offer resistance. There were many political parties in Germany. These the Nazis destroyed. They were determined to smash every organization where people might band together and resist them. There were Jews to be beaten and killed. The Jews were not powerful, but they were a convenient excuse for all the nation's ills. And besides, a Nazi party member could not take over this man's store. Hundreds of Catholics were put in jail because the Catholic Church had strength and could resist the Nazi drive for power. They had split the nation into 100 pieces, and then one by one, they had destroyed the pieces. Over these broken pieces, the Nazis rode into power. One party, one nation, one religion.
The Catholic Church did actually resist the National Socialists more than any other institution in Germany. They were the only ones having enough of a power base that they could kind of get away with that, although they were later kind of persecuted. Bismarck tried to create a Germany that was separate from the Catholic world. That's why he didn't include Austria in Germany, but they couldn't quite avoid the overlap between the Catholic world and Calvinist areas. Lutheran areas.
These men had won their struggle for power. They now ruled all of Germany. But still they had trouble with their oldest and most persistent enemy, the truth. They found that truth does not die easily, and so they decided to abolish truth. One great source of truth is literature, so they burned books, 20 million of them.
I don't have a problem with burning books. It's just the question is, which books do you burn? And is it wise to make it a spectacle? I don't know about that, but the principle of destroying some books, if it's a degenerate book, if it's like a book of witchcraft, would you want to destroy it? Probably, unless you were maybe a scholar and you had some reasons to preserve it. But like for the good of, like, is civilization better off with this thing existing or not existing? In some cases you could say, yeah, let's destroy these books. Like today, the left is destroying a lot of the literature and stuff. But that's because they hate our culture and they hate God. And if we were in power, we would want to destroy the degenerate things too.
Many great men in Germany who were spokesmen for truth were jailed or driven from their country. Teachers, writers, scientists. Education was discouraged.
Well, the professor wouldn't like that. But that could be a good thing to discourage education. Sometimes it depends on what the education is. Like, what are we talking about? Would it be a good thing to discourage the modern education system today? Maybe it would be a good thing. Now, if there's no replacement for it, then maybe that would be worse. But there's not exactly a whole lot of good stuff. You're not really learning anything practical. You're learning just basic stuff. You're being indoctrinated with a lot of harmful ideology, even involving self-mutilation being a good thing. All kinds of degenerate sexual stuff kids are being indoctrinated with. If you can homeschool, if you can afford to do it, or if you have some other option, some Christian area or some Christian private school where you can afford to send them, then maybe that would be better. Not everyone can do that though.
In 5 years, college attendance dropped 53%.
Historically, I think only 10% or less of the population would go to university. Probably in centuries past it was a lot less than that, like only a few percent would go to a university, and you would be in a class apart from the rest of society. You would not be in the class of a coal miner or a sailor or an artisan. You would be a poet living in some mansion somewhere, and but you had your role in society, and we don't live in that kind of society right now. But it's expected that everyone go to university and get largely useless degrees.
It was forbidden to listen to a British radio program or read an American newspaper. In Nazi Germany, you had to get your information from Dr. Goebbels. He knew what was best for you.
Oh, and here we are getting the information from the War Department of the United States, which maybe this is playing in a movie theater. So it's coming to you through Hollywood, which has always worked with the government to shape culture for power, which really they are criticizing the other side as doing. Are they really all that different from the ones they are criticizing? Maybe they're more like the heirs. Maybe, just a thought. Just a thought. Maybe the West, America, the global American empire, maybe you might focus on Europe, even modern Germany, but I would include America, Britain, all the modern West. Australia, oh, especially Australia. Look at what Australia did during 2020, 2021, and so on. Are they not actually the heirs? Those who continue the legacy and work and build upon the legacy of that famous mid-20th century German movement. The comparison isn't there in all regards. There's not like really the mass rally, but there are appeals to mass politics. It's pure mass politics, just through with technology not being different. But that's essentially the same.
There were others who spoke for truth, and I am proud to say that educators, were among them.
And what, may I ask, is an Aryan? I don't know myself. But let us see what our present so-called authorities have to say about it. They say he is tall, slender, blue-eyed, and blonde. There is no Aryan race. And more important, there is no master race.
Actually, the elites in the West who funded a lot of this stuff, they actually do believe in eugenics, especially in Britain. A lot of the eugenics worldview comes out of Darwin and Royal Society and all the stuff that followed that. And so it's funny, they're always, and it's not a coincidence that there was support for the Nazis in Britain. And actually, Hitler himself was bankrolled by Western financial interests. They put him in there. It was all part of their plan. I know it's a conspiracy theory, but I think this is something that they have discussed openly in writings.
There are people who may find these ideas convenient, but science cannot support them. There is no scientific proof that there's any correlation between a man's racial characteristics and his native ability or character. In all racial groups, we find the same range of potentialities. We find idiots and geniuses. We find criminals and philanthropists.
The same range of abilities. What's that to say? You find a range in any group? Yeah, you find a range, just like you find a range of height. That's the dumbest thing. How about, what are the characteristics of the range? How about ask that question? In every group, you'll find 0s to 10s. The dumbest idea, this stupid ideology of race is very liberal, and that is the same, basically, that we still hear today, except when we don't hear it today. Because you hear about race, we're all one people, we're all basically the same, and then, race is very important and very real, and some groups are noble and you can't criticize them, and other groups are evil. Well, one group in particular.
We must judge each man as an individual and not by the color of his skin or his eyes or by the length of his nose. Come in, gentlemen. It's comfortable. And remember that there is no master race. That is a scientific truth. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying.
And so, for all practical purposes, truth had been abolished in Germany. A lot of my German friends wondered what had hid them. How did it happen? Where did it start? It started right here. And this was where it could have been stopped.
I'm going to wrap this thing up, but I will say one thing. What's it called? Mass formation psychosis. That's a modern liberal cope to explain what went wrong with society during movements like happened in the mid-20th century Europe, or what happened recently around the Western world and beyond with the so-called pandemic. And they say that, well, people are scared and they get hypnotized by someone in the media or in politics that attracts their attention on a single event. maybe in this case the virus, or maybe in another case like nationalism, or attacking a certain group, but like focusing on a certain thing, and they're in a state of psychosis, and this is how these people who are otherwise sane can participate collectively in insane things. But it's fundamentally wrong. People are not insane, they're just not necessarily moral. Or they're immoral a lot of the time. And you know, like you can talk about the mentality of the mob, but you're still choosing to allow yourself to get carried away by the mob. On some level, you're still responsible for that. You're making a decision.
If those people had stood together, if they had protected each other, they could have resisted the Nazi threat.
Well, how do you stand together when you have different cultures, different spiritual beliefs, practices of exclusion towards one another already existing, differences of geography? If you're going to talk about standing together, then you're going to have to lay the foundation for that.
Together they would have been strong, but once they allowed themselves to be split apart, they were helpless. When that first minority lost out, everybody lost out.
Well, it's true that the left is a coalition of those who just want to bring down traditional hierarchies and benefit short-term from the spoils, but that these groups in this coalition have really nothing otherwise in common and no other reason to cooperate. That's true, and perhaps we can see that's a leftist perspective here, even in 70 years ago. Let's all just unify, then we can keep down this one nationalist group, but for no other good reason. They just thought that, well, we all just want to be free. Everyone just wants to be free. We're just going to all be free, but we're going to be able to have different groups cooperate to prevent any sort of exclusionary nationalism from arising. Because sticks are stronger when they're together. It's like, yeah, but
They made the mistake of gambling with other people's freedom. Now let's see how those bets paid off. Carl the farmer was gambling on a better life for himself. What he got was extra hours of back-breaking work, as much as 100 hours a week. He was forced to stay on his land and produce what he was told to produce.
yeah, so it didn't work out for them. All right, so this is pretty much wrapped up. But I just want to go back to the dialogue.
We must never let that happen to us or to our country. We must never let ourselves be divided by race or color or religion, because in this country we all belong to minority groups. I was born in Hungary. You are a Mason. These are minorities. And then you belong to other minority groups too. You are a farmer. You have blue eyes. You go to the Methodist Church. Your right to belong to these minorities is a precious thing.
Yeah, and did all minority groups build America? Build the foundations for America? I mean, there were a lot of different groups. I agree. That's part of the chaos of America historically, but not exactly the type of minorities that he's talking about in sort of the 20th century, post-20th century sense of just endless plethora of immigrants from any corner of the globe.
You have a right to be what you are and say what you think, because here we have personal freedom. We have liberty. And these are not just fancy words.
Well, yeah, they are. They are fancy words, and they're also just vague. And when you narrow them down, they are actually just dangerous words which destabilize and constantly, because they are charged with power, but they bring down, they open up. An opening can be good to an extent, but it has to be kept on a clamp. So you do not found your values on freedom or liberty.
This is a practical and priceless way of living. But we must work at it. We must guard everyone's liberty, or we can lose our own. If we allow any minority to lose its freedom by persecution or by prejudice, we are threatening our own freedom. And this is not simply an idea. This is good, hard common sense.
You want your freedom, right? So you gotta help other people. Not a good way to motivate someone. Kind of like selfish and kind of just like, well, you got to help them because you don't want bad stuff to happen to you. Not the best motivation. There's nothing really highly transcendent about that. It's all just very individualistic, which is just a disabling mechanism of liberalism. If you were duped by this, as many of us would have been, as I would have been when I was younger, then we were duped by the disabling mechanism of liberalism, which prevents us from identifying an in-group to which we belong or to which we would aspire to belong, and an out-group, the justifiably other.
You see, here in America is not a question whether we tolerate minorities. America is minorities. And that means you and me.
Like, for some stranger to be that intent and just getting in your face like that, and no pushback from this guy? Like, how ignorant is this white bumpkin?
America is minorities.
America is minorities. That's a very 21st century thing to be saying here. Not in a good way, but I mean, you better accept that America is minorities or you might have some trouble coming your way.
And me. So let's not be suckers. We must not allow the freedom or dignity of any man to be threatened by any act or word.
Hold on, let me get that straight. Let us not let the dignity of any men be threatened by any act or any word? What about murderers? That their dignity cannot be threatened by the act or word of any men? What are you talking about?
We must not allow the freedom or dignity of any man to be threatened by any act or word.
We must not allow the freedom or dignity of any men to be threatened by any act or word.
Let's be selfish about it. Let's forget about we and they. Let's think about us.
Whoa, let's be selfish about it. Whoa, hold on a second. Did they say that?
Let's be selfish about it. Let's forget about we and they. Let's think about us.
Let's be selfish about it. They're appealing to that individualist spirit, I guess, of America. Let's forget about we and they. Let's think about us. But you mentioned we. He said we, so we could also be us. Let's forget about we and they, like division, right? Like A versus B. Let's forget about that. Let's think about A plus B all together. That's their formula. Just everything blend together, meld together. But then do the people who make this propaganda, do they actually want to live by these principles? No, they don't. It's for you. It's for you idiots. Hasta luego, amigos.